Each of our national park trips gave us new, wonderful experiences, but this trip was more unique than all the others. Join us on our trip to find out why this trip was so different. Our journey covered 12 days, 10,984 miles, and 11 flights. It was fantastic. I've learned and experienced so much more than just beautiful scenery. I am a list kind of guy. I see a list and I want to complete the list. I love nature and the beautiful outdoors, so it was natural to have all the US national parks on my bucket list. This trip got us very close to that goal. There is a video for each of the 4 parks we visited on this trip, so check them out. The link is in the description. There are chapter markers for this video, so feel free to go to any particular day of our trip. Also, check out my blog for these and all the national parks we've visited, and my ratings on them. The link is in the description. Oh yeah, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thank you. This is the first day of our great California and Alaska trip. On this trip, we're about to visit the 61st and the 62nd National Park up in Alaska, north of the Arctic Circle. But before that, we are revisiting 2 of the parks that we did not get to a chance to really fully tour the last time, and we're going there now in September when the snow has completely melted. The last time that we went to these 2 parks, there was so much snow that we could just get to the visitor center and not much more. It will be very interesting to see the difference between this time and last time. And the 2 parks are Lassen Volcanic and Crater Lake. We arrived late in the afternoon at St. Bernard's Lodge, a quaint bed and breakfast near Lassen. Good morning. It is day 2, and today is all about Lassen. Last time we were here, it was pretty much snow covered, couldn't get very far, and right now there's no snow, so we are looking forward to a fantastic day of going through Lassen. After a delicious filling breakfast at the lodge, we headed for Lassen's southwest entrance. What a beautiful sunny day it is. It's a little bit cool, which is perfect for hiking. Our first stop of the day is the Bumpus Hill Trail. We bypass the visitor center and come here directly, so we can get this hike in before the parking lot fills up. So far, it's wonderful. Not too far away from the parking lot. Do a little bit of hiking and you see Lake Helen from up here. But look at this view. As you walk on the trail, you smell the sulfur first. And soon after you smell the sulfur, you see a nice steaming set of vents. The first view of Bumpus Hill. Great geothermal, reminds me of Yellowstone actually. After a 300-foot descent, we're now at the bottom where you see the boardwalk and all the steam vents. Wow, what a magnificent sight. After you get to the boardwalk of the Bumpus Hill area, keep walking, keep going. And you're going to climb up this hill and you're going to get this fantastic view from the top. You see all the vents and all the colors of the water. It is beautiful up here. Very much well worth the climb. Well, if you were to take only one hiking trail in Lassen Volcanic National Park, Bumpus Hill is the one to take. The trail map says it's 300 feet elevation change, but it's actually a little bit deceiving because you actually have to do 2 300 feet changes. You climb slowly on the way up to this hill, and then you got to go down 300 feet to get to the geothermal stuff, and then of course you got to come back up 300 feet before you go back down 300 feet. So you're actually doing the 300 feet twice, but it is well worth it. It is a wonderful, wonderful hike. After that fantastic hike, we doubled back to the Ko Yamani Visitor Center, took care of our park business, and grabbed a quick lunch. What a difference from our last visit. We drove the full 30 miles of Lassen Volcanic National Park Highway and stopped at all the major sites. The first stop after the Yamani Visitor Center is Sulphur Works, where you really smell the sulfur and you see the steam coming out of the earth. Mark as stop number 5, which is Emerald Lake. And the green color that you see here is from something called alga, which gives it a nice little green hue and yet keeps it very, very clear. Looks nice and pristine. You can sort of walk a little bit around the lake if you are so inclined and have more time. We're just making a quick stop here. Lake Helen is a great place for a picnic. Lots of picnic benches here, and the water looks blue and beautiful. And if you're so inclined, you can swim here. The South Beach that you see there with a few people hanging out. I gotta imagine this water's pretty cold though, so I don't know how long you want to stay in this water. But yes, you can swim here if you want. Look at that beautiful blue color lake. And we're at pretty high elevation here. And if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that right there is Lassen Peak. I think Lassen Peak is about 10,000 feet. Lassen Peak. The Lassen Peak Trail is not for the faint of heart. It is 2.5 miles, but it goes up 2,000 feet in that 2.5 miles. So it's quite steep and quite strenuous. But I gotta believe when you get up there, the view has gotta be fantastic. And not only is it steep, but we are starting out at 8,500 feet of elevation, which means that at the top it is 10,400 feet. So the oxygen is a little scarce at this altitude. Kings Creek Meadow, beautiful view of Lassen Peak back there. The white spots that you see are snow that hasn't melted yet, with a nice meadow in the front. We are on the Devastated Area Interpretive Trail. They basically explain to you how the eruption happened and all the after effects. Like it talks about the rock formation and why it is. Well, if you're into volcanoes, Lassen is probably the best park for you to come to because it's the park that's got all 4 types of volcanoes in one place. The composite, the shield, the cinder cone, and the plug dome. And it has all of them and has a lot of information here about how things erupt and all the different remnants and how you look at the evidence and the different kinds of rocks to figure out what really happened. At the southwest part of the park is the Manzanita Lake entrance, one of 2 major entrances here at Lassen. There are a number of trails here that basically goes around the lake and to a few other places, but the walk around the lake is absolutely beautiful. We did that the last time we were here, and it was fantastic. We drove all the way back to St. Bernard Lodge on the Lassen Highway, enjoying all the beautiful scenes once again. Another bright sunny day for day 3, and we're on our first hike, Kings Creek Falls Trail, and we're looking for a waterfall. It's about a 2.8 mile hike, about 400 something feet of elevation change, which is perfect for us. Get our legs stretched and get some exercise in before we head to Crater Lake National Park. So today is a little bit of Lassen, and we're doing the drive to Crater. We said our goodbyes to Lassen after Kings Creek Falls Trail. We visited the major sites on the western side of the park during our 2 visits. While the park was open on the eastern side, it suffered major damage from the 2021 Dixie Fire, so we did not visit it. Our second visit to Lassen was everything I hoped for. This was an underrated park that was easy and fun to visit. I was very glad we had the chance to do this park justice this time. Several people told us we should really visit Burney Falls, which is a California state park, and that is exactly what we did on the way to Crater Lake. Oh, what a sight! The 129-foot waterfall was wide and powerful. The parking area was right next to the waterfall. If that's all you wanted to see, it was just a short walk to the platform with an excellent view of the falls. Of course, we were not satisfied with just a quick look. We took the 1.2-mile loop that crossed the creek at the bottom of the waterfall and then to the top of the waterfall and crossed the creek at the top of the waterfall as well. It gave us great views of the waterfall at all angles. That was a great hike. We finally made it to Crater Lake. Very different experience this time because there is no snow on the ground. Last time we were here, it was snowing as we were entering the park. This is what it looks like in the summertime. But I'm quite sure in another couple of months, this will be much whiter. Well, the last time we came here, we couldn't go anywhere past the visitor center because the snow was so deep and the loop road was closed. And after I saw the beautiful blue lake, I vowed that I will come back when the snow is not here. And here we are on this September day. We are here and I am so much looking forward to see that blue lake and drive all around it. We are staying at the very historic Crater Lake Lodge, and it is iconic like many of the national park lodges. But if you want to stay here, you do have to reserve well ahead of time. I think we reserved this thing back in March or February, and it was already hard to get a couple of nights here, even in September, which is kind of late in the season. So if you want to stay at the Crater Lake Lodge, be sure to reserve well ahead of time. Because it's far from a major city, Crater Lake has one of the darkest skies. After dinner, we went to Discovery Point for stargazing. While it was a little hazy, the stars were magnificent. We got an early start on day 5 with a hearty breakfast at Crater Lake Lodge. Today is all about Crater Lake. We have a 5-hour boat tour that we're in the middle of right now. We are on Wizard Island. The boat tour makes a 3-hour stop here and allows us to go on some hiking. And we have just about done halfway through the hike and took a break with a beautiful, beautiful blue lake behind us. We hiked the steep Cleetwood Trail to get to the boat dock from the rim. It was the only place where you can access the lake. Wizard Island is an island that's a volcano actually unto itself that erupted about 400 years after the main eruption that formed Crater Lake. And it's actually not that easy to hike here. There are 2 trails. One of them goes to the summit, which goes up 900 feet, which is a bit more than what we can do, especially since we have to climb back up Cleetwood Trail. Now, Cleetwood Trail is the trail that goes from the parking lot down to the boat dock. And it's a little over a mile, but quite steep all the way. So we came down to the boat, now we gotta go back up when we get back to the boat dock. And that's why we're not doing the summit here on Wizard Island. Instead, we're taking the Funeral Bay Trail out to this little bay here on the sort of on the other side of the island. Now, the hiking is actually quite tough because you have a lot of lava rocks and the footing is very, very unstable. So you have to watch yourself all the time to make sure you don't twist the ankle and so on. So the footing is not that great, but nonetheless, the scenery is great. Crater Lake is indeed the deepest lake in the United States. It's over 1,900 feet deep, and some of the rim of the lake can go up 2,000 feet from the lake surface. So if you go from the 2,000 feet all the way down to another 1,900 feet in the lake, that's like almost a 4,000 feet drop, which is quite steep. In addition to Wizard Island, the stores stop at Lyle Rock, Devil's Backbone, Phantom Ship, A waterfall that was still flowing from the melting snow even in September. Pomus Castle. An old man log, which was a 30-foot long log floating vertically for at least 400 years, and it travels all over the lake. At the end of the tour, the ranger filled everyone's water bottle with lake water. It was cold and refreshing. After the strenuous hike back up Clearwood Trail, we stopped at Watchman's Overlook for the best view of the lake, and Discovery Point, where we were the night before for stargazing. We then hurried back to the visitor center at Rim Village before they closed so that we can get that all-important stamp. The view from Rim Village was fantastic as the sun started to set. We spent most of the day on the lake and the West Rim, so we just had to go to the East Rim before the sun goes down. We stopped at the Pomus Castle Overlook and Phantom Ship viewpoints for a view from the east side as the sun was setting over the Western Rim. Simply beautiful. Wow, what a fantastic day with perfect weather. Part of the East Rim drive was closed due to major renovation, so we couldn't drive all the way around, but we definitely saw what we came to see, and it was well worth it. When I saw Crater Lake the first time, in the wind and snow, I knew I had to come back and fully absorb this most beautiful lake. I was so glad that I did this. According to an analysis done by Travel Lens of Google reviews, Crater Lake was the most beautiful national park. I think they're right. On the morning of day 6, we got one last gorgeous view of the morning light on Crater Lake before we said goodbye to the most beautiful lake in the US. After a delicious breakfast stop at Becky's Cafe, about 40 minutes from Crater Lake, we got on a plane at Medford, Oregon and headed for Fairbanks and the great state of Alaska. When we walked outside at the Fairbanks airport, we immediately felt the cold of the night. Yes, we made it to Alaska for the 3rd time. Princess Lodge was our hotel for the night. As expected, we were among lots of Princess Cruise customers on the land portion of their Alaskan tour. It was after 10 p.m. and the bar and the restaurant were full of people waiting in line. Day 7 was the day we go inside the Arctic Circle and say goodbye to civilization as we knew it for a few days. It was time to get on a small plane and head for Bettles, more than an hour from Fairbanks and 35 miles inside the Arctic Circle. We checked in at Wright Aviation at their small terminal on the other side of the airport. There was no TSA security here, but they did weigh our luggage and our body to make sure the small 10-seater can carry the weight and was properly balanced. It was fun people watching because they were so diverse. They were hunters, natives going back after their doctor visits, and tourists like us, an interesting mix. Shortly after 9 a.m., we walked to the red plain and took off into the blue sky. From the moment of takeoff, my eyes were glued to the window and the fantastic sight of meandering streams and majestic mountains. While it was generally clear, there were patches of cloud, especially in the valleys. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it soon will become important. After about an hour, we started our descent, but the ground was covered by low clouds. Just as we were about to enter the cloud, the pilot pulled up and made a right turn. Looks like we were not going to Bettles, at least not right away. The flight had 2 scheduled stops, Bettles and Allakaket. There were 6 of us going to Bettles and 2 people going to Allakaket. All 6 of us going to Bettles were tourists. The 2 going to Allakaket were going home. After about 15 minutes, we started our descent, and once again, we were heading for the clouds. This time, however, the cloud broke up just as we got closer and the runway was clearly in sight. We landed on the gravel runway with a trail of dust behind us. There was a fuel tank and a hangar at the airport, and that was about it. The locals came with their ATVs to take the cargo and the 2 people. The best laid plans often don't happen here in the great wilderness of Alaska. We were supposed to land at Bettles first, however, it was fogged in. And basically went to another, Kobuk, I think it's called, which was kind of the second destination. We came here first, and fortunately it was not fogged in. We were able to land, and We're going to wait for the fog to burn off and see if we can get into Bettles anyway today. Well, that's what happens in the great Alaskan wilderness. If you can't see the runway, I guess you can't land. All part of the adventure. Now it was time to wait. Bettles was fogged in with nearly no visibility. Of course, there was no cell phone signal here, but the pilot had a satellite texting device and he was communicating with the people at Bettles. After about an hour, the fog burned off at Bettles and we got on the plane for the short hop there. The pilot said if the fog didn't burn off by the time we left, we would head straight back to Fairbanks. As we were warned, flight times in these parts of Alaska are estimates, not a schedule. Mother Nature has a big say in what happens. I was just happy we made it to Bettles safely. As we descended into Bettles, we still headed for the cloud, but this time, the boundary of the cloud ended just shortly before the airstrip. Eric Fox, the owner of the Bettles Lodge, greeted us warmly. We settled into our rooms and had delicious hot chili for lunch. After lunch, Eric gave us a comprehensive tour of Bettles with exhaustive information on every building, from the post office to the electricity generation building that is triple redundant. You really don't want to lose power here in the winter. The population of Bettles is 21. Not 21,000, but 21. There was a nice looking building that is a National Park Ranger Station and a visitor center, but it was closed because they could not find anyone to work there this year. Knowing they got people like us, the bucket list and the stamp collecting type, they left the passport stamp on the porch just for us. I was a happy camper. There were 2 Apache helicopters on the ground with some service members getting fuel and lunch at the lodge. It was fun to see them up close. When they took off, they were loud. Our tour package was all-inclusive, which meant food was included. While there was no menu, every meal was hearty and delicious. This was especially impressive since everything had to be flown in. As we gathered for dinner, we had great conversations with fellow travelers. Many of them were avid national park travelers like us, and we swapped lots of stories, experiences, and what to expect and tips. Lisa, who came the day before us, said they saw the northern lights last night and shared gorgeous pictures of green lights streaking across the night sky. I was very excited and crossed my fingers that we would experience the same. After dinner, we received our northern light briefing from Jason, who is our northern light watchman. He will stay up until 2 a.m. and wake us up if he sees a northern light. He told us how to take pictures of the lights on the phone and on the camera. At 12:10 a.m., Jason knocked on the door to wake us up. We got dressed in multiple layers, got my camera, and headed outside. The Aurora was just beginning to show, but it was behind some cloud, so we saw the cloud in a shade of green. After an hour outside in the freezing cold, I went inside and I was having a cup of hot tea. A fellow guest came in and said the sky was clearing and the light was more visible. I rushed outside and sure enough, there were patches of clear sky with green and purple streaks. It was still pretty weak, but clearly visible. It was not the wow I was expecting, but still interesting. This was a case of the picture being prettier than what we saw with the naked eye. I was a bit disappointed, but hope for better for the next 2 nights. After all, we booked an extra night to give us better chance to see the northern lights. That turned out to be a good decision. Day 8 was the day we planned this whole trip for. It's a beautiful day. On this day that we are going to go to the 2 national parks north of the Arctic Circle. We're starting out today at Bettles last night, and it was a great night at the Bettles Lodge, where we got up in the middle of the night and saw some northern lights. That was fantastic. We're about ready to set off to go to the gates of the Arctic and Kobuk Valley on our 5 or 6 hour plane tour. Very excited. Those will be the 61st and the 62nd park for us, and looking very much forward to it. But everything depended on the weather. In the previous week, they had to cancel a number of tours because rainy, cloudy weather. We woke up to a bright sunny day with blue skies and a chill in the air. Things were looking good for our 9 a.m. departure. Breakfast was hearty and delicious. I dressed in 5 layers of clothing with gloves and hats. The temperature was around freezing and there were no heat in the small 6-seater float plane. We drove down to the pond, about 2 miles away, and the 4 of us got into the plane with our pilot Stuart, who looked every bit the part of a bush pilot. We cruised around the lake for about 10 minutes, waiting for the engine to warm up. After some tests, Stuart lined up the plane on one end of the pond and gunned the engine as we took off into the blue sky. The sea was small, uncomfortable, noisy, cold, and drafty. But none of that mattered, because the view outside was mesmerizing. We all had headphones on so we can communicate with each other and to muffle the noise of the plane. Throughout the flight, we saw very few settlements. All of them had an airstrip and no roads beyond the settlement. It was surprising how many lakes and rivers there were. None of the rivers were in a straight line. They all meandered like a snake through the valley. River miles here are much longer than air miles. We saw many snow-covered mountain peaks, some taller than our plane was, as we flew through the valleys. As a reminder that Mother Nature was in charge here, the weather changes rapidly. Stuart told us that we needed to change our plan. Instead of going to Kobuk first, we were going to Walker Lake in the gates of the Arctic National Park first because Kobuk was fogged in. No big deal. He made a right turn and descended toward a 13-mile-long pristine lake surrounded by mountains on 2 sides. As we flew over the lake, Stuart pointed out a couple of houses that were built before Walker Lake was part of a national park. They're now worth $4.5 million because nothing new can be built in the park. You must really want seclusion to own these houses. It's hard to get to and surely expensive to maintain. But I guess if you have $4.5 million, those are not major problems for you. We docked on a small beach at the far end of the lake, got off the plane and into the lake with our rubber boots provided by the Bettles Lodge. Alright, we've made it to the gates of the Arctic National Park. And we're on Walker Lake after a bit more than an hour's of flight time from Bettles. And the place is tranquil, beautiful, and the scenery from the above on the way here was spectacular. Walker Lake is the biggest lake in the Brooks Range, and certainly the biggest in the gates of the Arctic National Park. It is cold, as it should be in Alaska in September, and I guess it's cold enough for us to not be too bothered by the bugs and the mosquitoes here. Gates of the Arctic National Park is the second largest, just behind Rango St. Elias, also in Alaska. And we're here in the middle of September, and there's fresh snow on the ground in the mountain ranges. So winter is coming. At the gates of the Arctic National Park, there are no trails, there are no roads. Only way to get here is by plane, or if you're adventurous enough, to paddle through here. And it is true wilderness. Not many people have been here. Of course, it's one of the least visited national parks. It's just so hard to get here. But once you're here, oh man, you are in seclusion. And that is the draw and the attraction and the preservation of this last bit of land where not many people have been to, and is certainly being preserved for its natural state. We are now officially in our 61st National Park, Gates of the Arctic. And it took a little bit of work to get here, but we are here and this is just fantastic. Scenery is beautiful. There are no people here whatsoever. The only people who are here right now are one other couple and our pilot, Stuart. It's drizzling just a little bit, not too bad. I think if it gets any colder, we'll be having snow. Normally, the tour stops here for half an hour, but because Kobuk had low clouds, we hung around Walker Lake for a good hour, which was just fine with me. There was probably no one except the 5 of us within miles. Stuart was prepared with bear spray, but he said he never encountered a bear because the plane noise scared them away before he ever gets there. We explored the shoreline, went a bit into the interior. The mossy ground was soft like a colorful carpet. It was lots of fun to explore, especially since the vegetation was not very dense. Since it was fall, There were lots of berries around, just in time for the bears to gorge themselves in preparation for hibernation. After about an hour, it was time to say goodbye to Walker Lake. Kobuk had cleared up. After about an hour of beautiful scenery, the Great Kobuk Sand Dune came into view. You can land directly on the sand dune, but we didn't because we had a float plane and she doesn't float on sand. It was cloudy, windy, and cold, but we were ecstatic to set foot in our 62nd National Park. Just like Walker Lake, Stuart took out the Kobuk Valley sign from the plane's pontoon, unfurled it, and took our picture as we claimed this park for the bucket list. Once again, we were by ourselves. We sat on the sand and ate the packed sandwich, chips, and an energy bar while we watched the slow flow of the Kobuk River. The other couple went upstream and disappeared as they explored the area. The area around us was sandy, kind of like a mini sand dune. We climbed up a 30-foot sandhill and got a nice view of the forest and the river. While the view was nothing to write home about, the fact that we stood where few people have been was special. We could have hiked to the Great Kobuk Sand Dune from here, about 2 miles away. There were no trails, so it would require orienteering and hacking through brush. We were neither skilled, equipped, nor had time to do the 4-hour round trip. After about 40 minutes of exploring, we got back in the airplane and said goodbye to Kobuk as the plane took off from the river, heading back to Bettles. The scenery from the air was pretty, but not spectacular. If we flew north instead of west, there were taller mountains with sharper cliffs, especially the gates of the Arctic National Park. While the mountains were not especially tall and the lakes not as blue, it was pure nature with very little human interaction. To set foot in places where few others have been was the attraction. Gates of the Arctic National Park and Preserve, the second largest national park, is usually the least visited U.S. national park. Only 9,457 people visited in 2022. I don't know how the Park Service knows this, but that's what they say. We were two of the 1,165 people who visited in September of 2023. On average, there were only 39 people per day who visited that month. Kobuk Valley is usually the second least visited national park, with 16,925 visitors in 2022. After a couple hours of flight, we got back to Bettles around 3:30. I was tired, cold, but so happy to accomplish the main purpose of the trip, to claim these two parks. Dinner was a delicious hearty steak, which hits a spot perfectly after the fantastic day we had. I went to bed early, expecting to be woken up for the Northern Lights. The next thing I knew, it was morning time! As it turned out, the cloud was thick overnight, so the lights were not visible. Day 9 was the extra day in case the other days didn't go according to plan. It was cloudy and rainy as we made our way to the lodge for breakfast. I was so glad this was not the day scheduled for the parks. After lunch, the weather started to clear and we ventured out, stopping at the closed visitor center to get our stamp and pick up the park brochure. Too bad they could not find a ranger to work. It would have been interesting to talk to a ranger. Logan, one of the staff at Bettles Lodge, took us to the nearby sled dog kennel, where they keep the sled dogs for the winter activities. Yes, you can come to Bettles and go dog sledding in the winter. The dogs all had their personalities, and most were eager to be petted. They each had a doghouse with a flat roof. Some of them sat on the roof enjoying the sun. Their coat was thick, as you would expect. They were not together in one pen because some of them don't like each other, and they would fight, sometimes to the death. While I can say I saw the Northern Lights from 2 nights ago, it was not satisfying. Part of the reason we booked an extra night was for a better chance to see these magical lights. So I was hoping for clear skies and strong Northern Lights. My hope came true when I heard a loud knock shortly after midnight. Jason, our Northern Lights watchman, said the light was visible, better than 2 nights ago. I put on layers of clothing and hurried outside. The sky was clear with lots of stars. It would have been fabulous just to stargaze since there was virtually no light pollution. Soon, the faint aurora got brighter and more pronounced. As the green hue got brighter, the purple hues started to show up. Jason took us to the floatplane dock for a fabulous view with the lake as a foreground. The lake was calm and reflected the aurora and the stars. This was the wow I was hoping for. Now I can truly say I've seen the Northern Lights. The lights faded as I headed back for some hot tea to warm my very cold body at around 1:30 a.m. As most people went back to bed, I decided to take one last look after the tea, and in that 15 minutes, the sky completely changed. When I went outside, the sky got brighter. The band of aurora got bigger and started to dance. I can see the wispiness as it got greener. I hurried back and got Loretta to come out. It only lasted 15 minutes before it started to fade, but I was so glad I caught it. It was magical. After all of that, it was hard to fall back asleep. The Bettles experience was what I hoped for. I knew there were lots of uncertainty, but fortunately, we were blessed with a great experience. We accomplished our primary objectives: to set foot in the 2 parks and to see the Northern Lights. The food at Bettles Lodge was excellent, and the staff was personable and friendly. While pricey, it was an experience of a lifetime. On day 10, we started our journey home. After a hearty breakfast, we waited for our ride back to Fairbanks. The sky was cloudy and rainy. Since traveling these parts was highly dependent on the weather, we planned an extra day in Fairbanks just in case our flight from Bettles was delayed. At 11 a.m., the plane arrived right on time, and we said goodbye to Bettles and took off into the rainy sky. While it was cloudy for most of the trip back to Fairbanks, it cleared up as we approached Fairbanks, and we had a good view of Fairbanks on the descent. Pike's Waterfront Lodge, our hotel for the night, was a fairly large and interesting place. It was well decorated with 2 buildings of 3 stories each, plus a bunch of log cabins. Our room was in one of these log cabins, about the size of a hotel room, but with a kitchenette. These cabins were clustered in groups with a fire pit in the middle. Very quaint. There were various exhibits on the property, and an Aurora theater, which was a place by the river with glass roof and a fireplace to watch the Northern Lights in comfort. In the afternoon, we went to the Morris Thompson Culture and Visitor Center in downtown Fairbanks. This is where the main National Park Service Visitor Center was located. We went through the exhibits, got more stamps, and talked to the ranger. Since it was not too cold, we walked along the river on a nice park path. On day 11, we continued our journey home with a late afternoon flight from Fairbanks and a red-eye from Seattle. The flight from Seattle had a bit of drama. Somewhere over Montana, the flight turned around and went back to Seattle due to a medical emergency. We landed back in Seattle at 1:30 a.m. and had to wait in the airport for a rebooked 5:30 a.m. flight. We got back home 10 hours later than planned. Not a big deal. This was a fantastic 12-day trip to claim our 61st and 62nd national parks, see the Northern Lights, and revisit 2 parks that we didn't fully visit the last time. We accomplished all these goals and had a fantastic time. Next will be the grand finale, our 63rd park on the other side of the earth, as far away as you can get from our 62nd park. Stay tuned for that adventure. We are on our way to visit all the national parks in the United States. Follow along by hitting the subscribe button below. Hit the notification bell so you know when a new video is released. Give it a thumbs up if you like this video, and please share it with everybody that you know.